It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. Glad you guys could join for a 49ers practice report because there are things going on in Santa Clara. Of course, the 49ers are in the midst of cutting down to 53 players, and they've made some moves, which I definitely want to talk about a little bit. And then they also had some players come back. We're going to get into the details of practice, what happened, who came back. It's going to be a fun episode. So please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. So let's talk about the players. If you haven't heard by now, 49ers have officially released and waived a total of 5 players so far. 49ers go from 91 to 86. They haven't officially dealt with the International Pathway Program player Isaac Alarcon yet. We know that there's more than likely going to end up on the 49ers practice squad, giving them a 17th player because he has an exemption. So 49ers haven't touched that yet. But they did release 2 veteran running backs already. And teams do this a lot of times to give these players an opportunity to land on another squad. And you got to give the 49ers credit for trying to do right by a couple of guys that were helping them out. And of course, the 49ers would probably like to get one of these guys back to the practice squad as a veteran running back. We'll see if that ends up happening. But the San Francisco 49ers released the most notable name, and that is Matt Breida. So the Cheetah came in a few weeks ago. It was at training camp. I was there the first day that he was there, and you saw the speed on display. It looked like Matt Breida. Now, of course, we know he's not as fast as he was in 2019 and 2020, but he's still got plenty of speed. And I thought he did a very good job for himself during the preseason. He was a player that could catch the ball in the backfield, make some nice catches there. He did a really good job. Now he's going to be looking for another team around the league. We'll see. There are running back needy football teams that could end up signing Matt Breida. If not, I think that Kyle Shanahan wouldn't mind having a little bit of a reunion with Matt Breida coming back as a veteran option on the practice squad just in case they suffer an injury. We know how injuries have been for the 49ers running backs, especially a guy like Elijah Mitchell, who's dealt with a lot. So, a veteran option that you could trust who's pretty good in the passing game could be something the 49ers look for eventually. Keyshawn Vaughn, also a player that the 49ers moved on from. He didn't really get a lot of opportunity during the preseason, but he was brought in for depth with all the injuries at the position. And so Keyshawn Vaughn will be looking for another roster. Then these following players were waived. So those were the veterans. More than 4 accrued seasons means they don't have to go through waivers. That was Breida. That was Vaughn. They're already free agents. They can go find a new landing spot. The following players have to pass through waivers because they have less than 4 accrued seasons in the league. They're not a vested veteran. And of course, the first one on the list is punter Presley Harvin, who did a very good job for himself, especially the Saints game. The amount of times he left it inside the 10-yard line was absolutely impressive. So there could be an opportunity for him around the league. So I think it's likely that maybe he gets an opportunity. I thought he did a really good job for himself. But the 49ers are waiving Presley Harvin means they must feel comfortable with Mitch Wisnowski going into week 1. That's good news for the 49ers. They're going to have their big-time punter ready to go. Offensive lineman Lewis Kidd, who came in once the 49ers suffered another injury on offensive line. That interior offensive line was depleted. And then they brought in a veteran player. He got hurt in his first day, and then he was gone, and they brought in Lewis Kidd. Lewis Kidd struggled a little bit through training camp, but he's been in the league for a little while. We'll see what happens where he ends up landing. I fully expect for him to clear waivers, and I don't expect the 49ers to bring him back on the practice squad. So I think this will be the end of Lewis Kidd's tenure in San Francisco. And then Jontre Kirkland, who the 49ers brought in from the UFL after they lost Tariq Owens to injury, and they were dealing with injuries to Jacob Cowing, Ricky Pearsall, and Tay Martin. They decided to bring in Jontre Kirkland, and he really didn't get a lot of opportunities on the field. Don't remember him being targeted very much in the passing game. So Kirkland goes and looks for another opportunity around the league. Now, the 49ers, though, did have a full padded practice today. So this week is interesting because, of course, there's no game. So they're going to get a lot of work, especially early on in the week. And then this thing's going to start tapering down because next week they're officially in full practice. They will be handling it the normal way they do. So Tuesdays will be off, and then Wednesdays they start really getting after it a little bit. But practices are never as as tough, as long as they were during training camp. So 49ers kind of ending that way. Now, some of the guys who did not show up to practice today, some of them are pretty notable, some of them not so much. Wide receiver Danny Gray is still hurt. So if you watched my video about the 53-man roster projection, I talked about the fact that maybe the 49ers try to do something to get Danny Gray to the IR, meaning that they have him there in case they need him. That would be the second straight year that Danny Gray starts the season on IR. Maybe the 49ers just wash their hands of Danny Gray and move on. But potentially, let's see what happens with Gray. But some injury happened last week before the last preseason game, and that's why we didn't see Gray, and he is still hurt. Of course, Ayuk is still holding in. Ambry Thomas has the broken forearm, likely to go on IR unless they work out a situation like I just talked about with Danny Gray. George Odom had rolled his ankle during pregame warmups of the game, so he missed practice. D. Winters, they're waiting on more imaging, but he's dealing with an ankle injury. That one is key. He could be the starting Sam linebacker week 1 if he's healthy. If not, we'll see what the 49ers ultimately do with D. Winters. John Feliciano is going to start the year on IR. Same with Kalia Davis. Gross Matos is now week to week with a MCL sprain. So we'll see when Gross Matos ends up getting back. Hopefully next week he's potentially going to be back. Jawan Jennings is dealing with an oblique. He is not in team portion of practice, but he was working on a side field. That is good news for the 49ers. And he also did some work in individual drills, which means he's getting close. He's going to be ready for the Monday night matchup. Isaac Yedem officially back from an ankle. He did individual drills with the team. He did not participate in team practice, which a lot of times is ramped up, more aggressiveness, more contact. So no Isaac Yedem in team yet. But the good news is he's out there practicing. McCaffrey was working on a side field, working through calf. We know he'll be ready to go next week. Leonard Floyd, same thing, working on a side field with the MCL. Day-to-day expected to be ready to go for the Monday night matchup. Aaron Banks still dealing with the finger, and they're hoping he will be back, but he did work on the side field. Now, some guys who came back to practice as well, Spencer Burford, who has had the broken hand and missed almost all of training camp after the hand injury, he was back, and even though it is casted up and braced up, he was practicing and going through full team drills. So it looks like Spencer Burford's going to be ready to go to be the number 2 guard behind Dominic Pooney. He was getting number 2 reps today, but depth at interior offensive line seems to be getting better with Spencer Burford coming back today. That's good news. Wide receiver Ricky Pearsall also came back to practice. He was wearing a blue no contact jersey, just like they did when he was at OTAs and minicamp, getting him in that blue contact jersey. So he's going through drills. He's running the routes, catching the ball from Brock Purdy and others, but not actually taking contact. So we'll see how this progresses. He comes out of the blue contact jersey later this week or even at the beginning of next week, he's likely to play in the game. If he does not, it's more up in the air. So 49ers have some decisions there when it comes to wide receiver. But the good news is Yedem is back on the field. Spencer Burford's back going through team drills. And when you get Ricky Pearsall, he's starting to get back on the field as well. Those are good signs for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, with Aaron Banks still out, Nick Zakelj and Ben Bartch were alternating the starting left guard role. Nick Zakel's getting more of the reps, and I think that Nick Zakelj beat out Ben Bartch during the preseason. But 49ers have a decision to make when it comes to interior offensive line. I think it's more likely Nick Zakelj makes the 49ers 53-man roster. But if they feel they need more depth at the position, that could force them to keep a guy like Ben Bartch over maybe a young, promising player like Jarrett Kingston. So 49ers are going to have to make some decisions on the offensive line, and that undecided nature of Aaron Banks could make it a little bit difficult for a guy like Kingston, who normally would be inactive and stashed and just develop the way they've done with other young linemen, including a guy like Nick Zakelj. But if something happens and they feel like they need Bartch for depth reasons, that could end up forcing them to waive Derek Kingston and possibly lose him. It's hard to find good offensive linemen, and Kingston doing so well when it came to pass protection could make him a player that teams around the league are really excited to get their hands on. So that's something to watch as well with Bartch. But it's still pretty clear the 49ers expect Aaron Banks to be ready week 1. So in that case, they won't have to worry about Bartch. So we'll see how that thing ends up, shaking out. Now, when we're looking at the defensive end position, we talked about Leonard Floyd, Gross Matos, both dealing with injuries. And of course, we know with Floyd, it's more day to day. With Gross Matos, it must be a little bit more serious. He's week to week. The 49ers today, when they went through their first team defense, Robert Beal Jr. was taking snaps opposite Nick Bosa. I think cementing the thought that Robert Beal Jr. is defensive end number 4, and he would be in line to start, of course, if those guys weren't ready. But I think it's fair to say that we all believe that Leonard Floyd is going to be ready to go the Monday night matchup versus the New York Jets, and he'll get out there. So I think that Robert Beal Jr. being in there kind of illustrates he's going to make this roster. So if there's any question, then that'll kind of clear it up a little bit. So with George Odom out, Malik Mustafa was getting the first team reps. He was out there practicing with Jair Brown. And we know that Malik's had a little bit of a mixed bag when it came to his preseason this year, but he's getting out there and getting extra reps. And there's still not a decision on Talanoa Hufanga. That's coming later this week. But Kyle Shanahan kind of started leading into the possibility of Talanoa Hufanga staying on the PUP list into the regular season, which would mean he would miss the first 4 games. Of course, the 49ers don't have to do that. They could activate him and keep him inactive for the game and just elevate a practice squad player. But they might need the roster spot, especially if they're afraid that he's not going to be ready to go, especially 2-3 games in the year. You might as well just leave him on the PUP list, let him miss those 4, and get him right. Make sure you don't rush him back. So if there's any question marks about Hufanga's fitness to play, I think you just got to make sure you keep him on the PUP list and bring him back. That would free up a roster spot potentially for the 49ers. And you know that I kind of believe that they will go with 3 safeties with Hufanga being on the PUP. I would much rather that he gets activated off the PUP and is able to play with Jair Brown. But I think it's likely that when we play the Monday night matchup, that it's going to be George Odom and Jair Brown as safeties 1 and 2, with Malik Mustafa being safety number 3. So, overall, the safeties have been doing really good. Jair Brown did get a long pass over the top of him to Ronnie Bell today. So, you're going to make mistakes in practice, and that happened. Yammer Lenore continues his hot offseason with another INT at practice. So good for him. I thought he looked good in the preseason game, and that's really important. And then a guy that's pushing to make the practice squad, Sam Okawanu, getting a little bit of pressure on the quarterback today. So the 49ers have some decisions to make when it comes to edge. They might ultimately, depending on what's going on with Yetur Gross-Matos, they might have to look outside the organization, or they could just put Okawanu and Barrett and those guys like that on the practice squad and elevate them for day one. You can only elevate a couple of guys, so you're not going to be able to elevate at a bunch of positions. I think one position you can elevate is safety, and maybe the other one's defensive line. That would make a lot of sense for the 49ers. So they got some decisions to make at several positions, and I think they're going to continue to work through this as the week goes. I think one of the interesting things is going to be what happens at linebacker with the injury to D. Winters and who they ultimately get out there, because a lot of these linebackers have been doing very good, including Curtis Robinson. One notable note is that Jalen Graham had to be taken off the field today a little bit too much contact with Logan Thomas. So Logan Thomas made a catch today, and if you're wondering if Logan Thomas is going to make this team, I think it's likely he will. Logan Thomas got hit pretty hard over the middle of the field, and so they removed Jalen Graham and put in Flanagan Fowles. So that is pretty interesting stuff. I like the enthusiasm from Jalen Graham, but just a little practice report going over who is back, who's still injured. Of course, tomorrow the 49ers have to get down to 53 by 1 p.m. Pacific time. So that will be happening. I will be more than happy to come on and talk about who the 49ers keep and who they don't. So be on the lookout for that tomorrow. I really appreciate you guys coming through for this 49ers practice report. I'm looking forward to tomorrow so we can find out who this 53-man roster is and how the 49ers are built for 2024. I will say this, what we find out tomorrow probably won't be the same as what is going on Wednesday or Thursday as the 49ers continue to make moves. Thank you guys for joining. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I really appreciate you all coming through. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. And remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.